Thanks, Madhu. Thanks, Karthik, for being here. This is amazing because
Hello.
we have the two largest consumer platform companies on stage, and they have been doing amazing work in Gen AI for a long time. So I was very curious to understand what they are doing. And this, what we'll do is we'll keep last 5 to 10 minutes for questions from the audience, whatever you want to ask. But broadly, today we're just going to cover 4 topics. One is, a lot of entrepreneurs came to me and said, hey, we want to understand how are other companies using Gen AI, right? Have you taken the leap? Where do people, what companies are using for marketing, for product, customer support? Are people using it in engineering, how they're using? So would love to know more about that. Maybe we'll start with you and then Madhu.
Super. Thanks for the invite, Priyank, and thanks to the Accel team for putting this together. I think it's a great format. So Flipkart has always been at the vanguard of adopting technology for solving core consumer problems, right? So we have been using systems like large recommender systems, using systems like federators and orchestrators to serve content, understanding a consumer, insights and so on and so forth. So most of them are based on traditional DS techniques. You can call it machine learning. For all practical purposes, it's large data pattern recognition and how does it pipe into insights. I think November last year is when we saw a lot of flurry of action around generative AI. And by Jan, we went to the board, and because we are now owned by Walmart, we had the Walmart team also with us, and we were very clear that this is a big bet, and we want to skate to where the puck is, right? So one of the big differentiators between, I won't say old tech, but the old forms of exploiting big data and the new form of it is, this is generative, right? So there's a lot of productivity gains that we get when we use it for some of the use cases internally, and I'll talk to you about that. But more importantly, when it comes to consumer-facing use cases, specifically in a large catalog-based, self-serve system, that's what we are, right? Because people come to us, search, they browse, they check out, and then they purchase. That's the high-value action route for us. What we get to see is most of the searches are semantic in nature. Like you want to buy a phone for your father, so you say best phone for the father, but there's no catalog that says this phone is for the father. The catalog talks about, say, specifications at a certain price point, product point and all, right? The human understanding, and that's one of the big reasons why offline, has this massive edge over online when it comes to trust and relationship building, because there's a human interface, because the human is able to translate your request into what it takes to serve that particular request. I think that layer is a big solve for players like us. So in fact, if anyone of you has the Flipkart app, and I'm hoping all of you have the Flipkart app, please do open it, or you'll have a swiping action on the home screen, right? So we went all in on this. We don't launch anything on the home page unless and until it's well tested. So we went all in. We were okay to have false positives because we believe that there's a disruptive technology that solves for consumer problems. So what we have done is we have built Flippy, which is a end-to-end bot that allows you to, take the e-commerce journey through a very conversational lens. So you can ask any questions, and the use cases that we serve, as we call it in the product world, is inspiration, because worldview is there. So you could actually come and ask a question, what should I buy today? And I can give you a bunch of answers, right? So serendipity, inspiration, advisory. I have a X feet room, will this AC work for me, right? Because I'm able to now compute at the back end. All of these questions used to happen off Flipkart on other engines, maybe for all practical purpose on Google and any other blog or research surfaces. We're actually able to bring in some of these use cases into our own ecosystem today because of the power of generative AI, right? So one big use case for us is a consumer-facing bot where we're able to solve for discovery, inspiration, assistance, comparisons, recommendations, search, all within that particular surface. And that's a big unlock from the traditional search and the browse behavior. The other big piece I think that you would have seen the industry adopt, and which we are also going towards, is B2B, or rather internal productivity tools. So we are doing a bunch of things around content generation, specifically for our own landing pages. We still haven't experimented with SEO content generation because we are not very sure of how Google will treat us, and SEO is a very critical source of organic, high intent traffic for us. So we are still, treading waters out there. So the piece is on internal content. So we have multiple pages, which we call as landing pages or category pages. The other thing that we're doing is reducing cost of doing business for small sellers, because we are a marketplace and we are a large marketplace. How do we get small sellers to come? Because the catalog tax is real, right? So there's a photo, they have to fill everything in English. Not all small sellers are savvy. They have to actually hire someone or an agency. We want to break those barriers. So can you just take a photo and make a light catalog where we generate the catalog? And as and when the particular item hits a certain sales threshold, it goes back to our old heavy QC flows, right? Like we also don't want to disappoint consumers. So there's a good balance between lowering cost of doing business for sellers, getting them onboarded, and at the same time ensuring value creation for consumers. The third big area that we're experimenting with is on CX. And of course, I mean, you would have seen a lot of consumer bots, a lot of CX bots come up with Gen AI. And the genuine piece that we are, I would say, experimenting with today or sort of slightly struggling with is not all sources of data are very well linked for this, right? So I don't get to see order history within the LLM context. So at some point, there's an agent handoff, and we're trying to solve for all of those pieces. I think the conversations that we have in terms of our own models versus the right orchestrators to build so that all the sources of data come together for the agent of agents to take the right action is a big roadmap item for us. And the last piece, obviously, is developer productivity. We are doing a bunch of things around it, but so far, I think the big thrust has been on B2C or the bot use cases, followed by some of these pieces on content generation, which effectively is a co-pilot, but for our merchandisers.
Madhu?
Hey, thanks for having me over, and great to be here. So at Swiggy, we started the data science journey and have been investing heavily in it for over 5 years now. So that was the launching pad, and around a similar time frame, November-ish, is when, based on everything that was going on, we felt that it made sense for us to also make the leap from more traditional techniques and see how we can use Gen AI to unlock new use cases which were either not feasible until then or were pretty expensive to pull off. And in doing this, again, similar areas where how can we delight our customers, how can we serve customers better, how can we improve productivity, and how can we do things that were not feasible until now. So those were the various verticals. And we, of course, started dabbling with the OpenAI as well as other open source models that were out there and training them. Jairaj from my team's actually going to share a lot more details on that. He's back there. And we started with that. And one of the things that we started out with was that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how things will pan out and what will be the ROI of these, given that some of these, like as you said, the cost is pretty high and we operate in a pretty low margin business. So we looked at a whole bunch of these things and identified a few areas. So the first one is, of course, enhancing the product there. Made a bunch of investments in search. This was, again, understanding search in more human terms. So though we may have had a lot of traditional, say, Karnataka sweets, when you actually key in that term, it won't show up anything because we don't understand that so well. With neural search, we were actually able to do some of those things. And this actually, of course, one tip here is when, as a platform, you've not been able to answer queries like this for a long time, nobody's going to come in and type this on day one. So we had to do a bit of product marketing to nudge customers to actually query in more natural terms than they were used to. So that's something that if you're building, you may want to also think about what the users have been trained until now for and how you can actually help them use your product better. And next we invested in like one place where people were actually going to other places, whether it's Google or competition, was to understand the reviews on restaurants. But a lot of these spoke about how the ambience was and things which were not very relevant. But they were still using that to make decisions. And we were actually sitting on a lot of data that was collected as quote-unquote feedback, not really reviews, which meant they were not the best to directly showcase to our customers, and therefore we weren't showing them. But this actually allowed us to build out a quick summarization of the review that we could show, literally just like a 2-3 line summary generated from all of this. And this was one thing that we put out there and actually saw pretty interesting uptake in our conversions. And then we, of course, invested in CX bots. Some of it was ChatGPT 3.5, 4, as well as some open source models. And there, we've had some mixed learnings, some places where we found it works very well, some places where we need to iterate, and some places where the ROI at this point may not be there for us to actually roll it out at large scale. And the other thing that it unlocked was there are a lot of behind the scenes to provide the right kind of item or dish images, restaurant images, product details on Instamart. There is a lot of work that goes in, which is not really high leverage. So we were able to actually get some good leverage by deploying either image-to-image generators or text snippet creation, or for marketing. While we do have a really creative and great marketing team, it's actually hard for us to know what kind of push notifications, what text, what time a user reacts to. And even feeding the right kind of these PN messages was something that we use GenAI for. And of course, not all of this is, one of the other things that we did is we're not trying to build everything in-house. We are using, experimenting with a lot of tools out there and leveraging them. And lastly, on the developer productivity part, that's actually been one of those where there was naturally like a lot of interest in people adopting it. And then we also were able to use this for generating and reducing the number of almost like MIS queries that people run, where people could just type in what they want in English on, we're a very hyper-local business, and the sales manager wants to access these things. These are all available in like dashboards, but it's a lot easier. They'll look it up more often if you make it low friction to access. And that's one more area that we've been investing in.
This is great. Thank you both. So one question then, right? So a new technology has come, and you guys are this. How do you plan out the impact of that technology across the org, right? So on day one, you saw, let's say everybody, OpenAI, ChatGPT captures the attention for everyone. Then how do you decide, okay, like in your case, you said, Karnataka Sweet Search. That's like semantic search, I'll apply over there, that's amazing. Or in your case, you said, okay, making that Flippy bot, which is like a big initiative at Accel, right? At Flipkart, right? So how do the product teams, how do the business units, like more as a decisioning perspective, come together and say, this is how it will get impacted. So this is how, and did you need to make changes like a separate tag team altogether for GenAI, separate developers who will only focus on research on that? Yeah.
I think that's a great question, right? It fundamentally boils down to what is the company's value creation approach, right? Where, say, Flipkart creates value is, I think, what you showed in one of the slides, more consumers shopping more often. That's the revenue gross margin equation for us. And at the cost side is the pieces on serving, how do you make it more efficient, more throughput, scale economics, fixed cost leverage, and so on. So the fundamental first principles approach is figure out use cases, and actually it's not about figuring out use cases because we knew these problem statements, like our search, pretty much exactly what he said. Keyword searches are only so much. I mean, there's only so much it goes, and hence people use Google because Google obviously cracked a lot of these techniques early on, and we all know that BERT and the Transformers papers, all of those came out of the Google stable house, right? So we did see a lot of research because when you analyze the SEO keywords or the SEM bidding that you do see a bunch of these keywords that come up, and we knew that we couldn't serve those effectively. And we're also struggling with the then current technology, which is NLP and multimodal in the world of voice and image and all, right? So when this came in, we knew there's a clear unlock. And if we unlock this, I mean, the role of the product manager then is to really imagine how are the metrics looking down the funnel. So we would imagine there'll be more sessions. We would imagine there'll be more dwell time or browse time. There's more relevant CTR, and because there's more relevant CTR, conversion goes up. So ultimately, the business case that we put together, well, obviously it didn't offset the cost, and now we'll talk about cost also soon. The business case was very consumer first, right? And then we saw the ecosystem, especially Microsoft, come around really heavily on Copilots as one of their, leading edge service offerings. Then we also realized, I think the concept of generative AI and the concept of generative images coming out of it came slightly later. So then we realized the use cases around productivity when it comes to merchandising, when it comes to text generation, because those are big workflows that we have, but again, to serve consumers, right? So I think we prioritize it slightly later, but at the heart of it depends totally on your DNA and where do you create value as a company. And maybe the answer is very different from manufacturer. Maybe the answer is very different for any other sector. So
just to change that question a little bit for you, Madhu. In this case, for example, see the person who's doing, let's say in their case, they had a seller co-pilot, right? Now that seller co-pilot, there is a person who's managing that business. He is just focused on making efficiency out of it. Or in your case, let's say there is a restaurant manager, area sales manager. He doesn't know about Gen AI. He's not thinking Gen AI. So how does he get to know I can get impacted by this? Like, is there, like, how do you make that awareness inside the org where ideas can come from anywhere and some product person gets, oh, let me throw an idea to the management, maybe it'll stick. So,
yeah, actually, one of the first things that we had to do, while there were a lot of problem statements and metrics that were already there that we could move with Gen AI, we also took a step back and said, let's also evangelize this across the company, and did multiple workshops with leaders, especially business leaders, because as you said, they were a lot more focused on the here and now metrics that they were driving, and try to understand what are the things that would actually help almost co-create the problem statements. For example, one thing that we are still, again, not yet there at launch, but one thing that we identified was this Copilot for X applies a lot to our frontline workers. Okay. So this is something where if we had operated in silos where there is the product and data science team or the engineering team, and then there are folks who are doing this on the ground, I think it would have taken a long time for us to get to this. So I think, of course, this is us being a slightly largish company. For younger companies, I guess this just happens more organically. But if there are pockets where, let's say you have field staff who actually aren't as plugged in, and probably necessarily so, there it does make a lot of sense to evangelize. And we also took a few, like first, for us, while we've had a central data science team, with all of the changes, it kind of made sense for us to organize ourselves and say, hey, we need like a single-threaded leader thinking about this. And that's, again, Jairaj. And then some of the KRs were actually for him to go and evangelize with the company, identify the problem statements, and it's not that there are problem statements with high ROI sitting there and we just need to now pick it up and execute. That itself took, at least in our case, took like 2 to 3 months to identify like good high ROI use cases. And then internally we've organized this as a thrust, which means it gets reviewed by the CEO team, like the CXOs, and we have monthly updates, and we look at all the initiatives. We help unblock resourcing bandwidth for it, not just for building it out, like with data science or engineering or product, but also in operationalizing this with the field teams. So, yeah.
Sorry, please finish.
No, so essentially, though we've had a very strong ML, DSML team for quite some time, it did make sense for us to still almost start this as a net new initiative. And we ran it in a slightly different way though, compared to the other thrusts where we know exactly what we are doing. Here we actually said that, look, we don't know everything about this, and that's how we'll actually allow this program to evolve over time, where we identify a few things and also move a few things below the line. Again, while all of this may sound like very standard, that's how product backlogs are managed. With some top-down thrust, what happens is if there is a line item, there is a reluctance to move it below the line, even after people discover that it may not be the highest ROI. So we made some provisions for this so that it was done in a very deliberate manner.
I think very interesting. So one, you said you already known problems in the business. You can unlock ROI using this. You did the analysis. And then the other approach you said was also evangelizing it with business users is also important, so that people who are not close to it get to know where, right? So I think both are important. One last question from my side, then we'll open up for audience. Closed source models, open source models, challenges in deployment, inferencing costs, like it's very expensive, right? So the pricing is US based. So how have you guys, and you guys operate at a scale of like millions of customers, like tens of millions of orders every day. So how, and API cost for OpenAI is like damn expensive, right? So how have you guys rationalized this, put it into production? Yeah.
I think it's a great question, and Nikesh, I think I can't see him here. Nikesh, if you can, yeah, there he is. He's my chief out there, but it's pretty much what he was talking about, Jairaj. So he'll walk you through some of the thinking that we have on open versus closed. But broadly speaking, we wanted to hit GTM and for all practical purposes do a POC on an MVP. Like if you really think about it, on ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. The good thing was it's enterprise grade. Obviously there are challenges of latency, but it did meet our bars on the skill sets that it has, like things like summarization, generation, aspect extraction, and so on. Now, as and when the bot adoption goes up, and not just the bot adoption, all the other internal facing use cases that we spoke about, like, lowering the cost of doing business, generating content, and, all of those pieces, we are quickly pivoting to figuring out what is the right mix of models that we need. So there are two thoughts, and I think he will walk you through some of this in the ongoing sessions. One obviously is an ensemble of models approach, where we leverage the best, you have some sort of a federator or an orchestrator, depending on the use case, hits the right models. The other is going narrow domain, right? And I think we see value, at least early shoots, we see value in going to a narrow domain, because then you're able to control the tone of the generation, you're able to control the kind of inferencing that happens, and you're also able to obviously pre-train the model on a corpus that is relevant to you, right? So that's where we are going towards.
Can you give an example?
So for example, today, a lot of the inference is happening on the fly. It's not part of the model history, it's not part of the model context, right? And we are expecting the model, for example, if the use case is aspect extraction, we are expecting the worldview, or we are expecting the model parameters to understand aspects better than how we understand. Whereas we are the ontological experts in aspects, because we have a structured catalog, we know what are the various aspects of different categories, different products within the categories, and the kind of spread and the kind of frequency with which some of these patterns emerge. Training a model on that gives us better accuracy, better relevance, specifically in the outputs that the model generates, right? So that's the domain-specific approach. And again, as I said, we are still playing around with it and sort of trying to understand which is better. But my personal view is eventually it'll move to an ensemble of models approach because not every model can be an expert in one domain. So we'll have to see how to play it out.
For us, it's actually a very open approach where use what makes sense. And of course, latency has a big role to play, so does cost. There are cases where we've actually, as I mentioned, trained open source models and run them internally. There are cases where we are directly using 3.5, ChatGPT 3.5. We've also done explorations with some other models. So the key for us would be to ensure that for example, for internal knowledge management, we use models which are powered more from like the Anthropic so that hallucination is reduced or lower. And again, this is not something we built, this is something that we're using. And for other cases, we actually have used open source Hugging Face models, models hosted there, with some amount of fine-tuning to reduce the parameter space. So it's a mix of everything. I think it's, I'll just go back to the Uber principle that we have, which is too early for us to take sides or be very opinionated on something. Probably better for us to see how things evolve, and then the key is while building some of these things, it's important for us to actually engineer systems that can allow us to rapidly change the providers. So that's one of the key principles that we are actually looking at, and almost like how do you build a middleware that can abstract out some of these things and allows you to switch and change things without a lot of change management costs.
Go into so many questions, like I'm like thinking, okay, are you guys doing serverless? Are you guys like, what are the vector databases you're using? Are you using private cloud? Anyways, but we will take some audience questions. So folks, can somebody please pass the mic? Okay.
Hi.
Please say your name, your company, what you do, and the question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Puneet from Style by Vida. We are a fashion technology for B2C company and a B2B company. We are a B2B company ourselves. So my question for you is, Karthik, that you talked about how there is a paradigm shift happening from search, where people searched for based on product features, to need-driven, what do you need? It goes well beyond recommendation systems because there is empathy involved. There is a shopkeeper near my home. If I go ask for a Kinley water bottle, and if the guy does not have it, he will suddenly start selling me Bisleri, because that's better that he has. So there is a trust associated. How do you develop that trust and empathy with the users when going beyond from product feature search to need-driven recommendations, which is way beyond recommendation systems?
Sure, I think that's a good question, and in fact, one of the big vectors of development in e-commerce is trust, right? Because how do you really close the offline to online gap? So we do a lot of work on reviews and ratings. We do a lot of work on soliciting the right kind of reviews. How do you publish reviews and ratings across the funnel? I think what is important in this entire space of leveraging GenAI is the way we have powered semantic or objective versus subjective queries, as we call it, right? The entire concept of, like, if you search for a best phone today, the word best gets broken down into what are all the aspects, and how do you then do ranking amongst the reviews and ratings. So there is a lot of user-generated content that goes into the index, which is the point that you mentioned on VectorDB, and of course we do RAG techniques and all of those pieces. But ultimately, there's a lot of weight that goes into user-generated content, user-generated ratings and reviews, and of course, we also accept images and videos from users today. So all of that comes together to power the set of results, and then there's a ranking layer that happens over and above that for relevance and some amount of personalization that we do for our consumers, right? But at the heart of it, the big shift is the difference between an objective query serve layer and a subjective or a semantic query serve layer is a lot of the aggregated user-generated content or user preferences get reflected in the searches, which was not the case earlier. So when you write phone for my father, the system is able to translate that father is equal to elderly, and that in the world of phone means screen is equal to large, battery size equal to large, graphics not as much as possible, and hard disk not as much. So we are able to actually give a set of very relevant results, which is what an offline salesperson or an offline shopkeeper would have done, because we're able to understand the kind of aspects. So that's part one. And part two, we also trawl through our reviews where someone has said, I have gifted this for my father, which may obviously be a low frequency review, etc. But we get those pieces. Earlier it was not possible. Earlier it was just a objective keyword match. I think that's the big difference that we are doing today.
They had a question here. Can somebody pass the mic that side?
We'll get you the mic after this.
Hi, my name is Sahil. I'm with Encrypt AI. We're a B2B software company providing security, privacy, and compliance for enterprises in the AI space. So my question to you is, Karthik, you briefly mentioned OpenAI is enterprise grade. So what do you mean when you say a model or a provider is enterprise grade? Are you talking more in terms of latency costs perspective or more security compliance perspective? And when you're scaling, right, you mentioned you're using closed source models for MVP pilot stage. What's the motivation to move to more narrow domain models? Is it more that you can control that AI stack, or is it more that you'll have better performance, so to speak?
So I think the big, I would say, thinking that we have is we want to make sure that the results are very relevant for our consumers. And there are 2-3 aspects on which consumers rate the results. One obviously is it accurate, is it helpful? And we'll anyways walk through some of the evaluation parameters also when the session comes in. What we are saying is if the models are trained on our domain context, and we all understand there are 3 broad ways of training. There is RLHF, which is very expensive. There is supervised fine tuning, which is more of in context. What we want to start doing is move towards that and continuously check for performance, right? And because we believe that the fast feedback loop is the best way for us to accelerate adoption in this particular space, because otherwise consumers will be able to, get what they want, but not necessarily on the surface that you provide, and that's a value loss for us, right? So to your point, I think the big shift is it helpful for consumers, and is the closed models versus open source models, which one works better for us? And over a period of time, how do we really build some sort of an IP in this space, because that allows us to generate true value for our consumers. That's the way that we are thinking about it.
So, sorry, Madhu, so from a CTO office perspective, do you have like SLAs put into picture where you have like tech SLAs, say this has to meet this much of latency, this much of usage, like for models? Do you do that?
Yes, we do. And in some cases, we are actually bound by what the latencies of the providers are. And in some cases, we've actually gone and like one interesting thing that is going to go live soon is we actually use this to generate for example, when you search for a recipe, you could just go and buy all the ingredients for that recipe on Instamart. So one way to do this is actually send this live to a model and then have it spend the 7-8 seconds and come back with an answer. Or pick like the top end, because There are a finite amount of recipes which are popularly searched, and then generate this behind the scenes, and then actually surface this without actually being bound to the latency that the model has. And now if, as and when we are going to open this up, there will be a set of responses like the top X, which will be served without actually hitting the models, and then the tail, which would still go to the model and have some latency. But yeah, we do have governance, but again, there are cases where the latency, especially for like a CX bot, I think Abhinav and Jairaj are going to talk about that, is forbidding, and you simply can't actually have a good customer experience with that. And in other cases, you can manage with the right user experience, how you can actually tolerate the latency, though. But I think the space is evolving so fast that the latencies, I'm sure, are going to go down rapidly.
Sorry, just to add, I think it's comforting to see we're all in the same problem space. So.
Yeah, I'm sure that some of the answers will come from some of the companies here solving for inference optimization latency. But sorry, we are over time. But so but before we break, we'll take instead of 15-minute break, we'll take a 5-minute break so people can move to the next tracks. One request I have for Swiggy specifically, you should have a bot how to lose weight. Right? So, like I'm such a big user of Swiggy, and like, hey, I need to burn. Please tell me what should I eat today so that I don't go over my calorie count. I think a lot of us would need it. So yeah, any research on that?
No, this is actually, I mean, I definitely need that too. So we have taken a stab at this. It's called guilt-free. But this is where we realize that we are a platform which is indulgence-seeking. So not the first thing that people think of when they want to lose weight. So how do we gradually get there? Because this cohort of customers are actually growing, right? So definitely we'll do something in this space.
All right, thank you. Thank you guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.